Fake final girl. Scream 4 brings Sidney Prescott back to Woodsboro years after the original massacres. Now older and more experienced, she's basically become a living legend. And in the middle of this new wave of murders, Jill Roberts, Sidney's younger cousin, enters the picture. Right away, Jill fits perfectly into the final girl archetype. Young, vulnerable, and surrounded by suspicious friends. It seems obvious that she's the franchise's next survivor. The movie plays directly into that expectation. It creates multiple suspects, throws out theories, distracts the audience, and keeps Jill positioned as the victim the entire time. But in the end, everything changes. Jill is not only one of the killers behind the Ghostface mask, she's the mastermind of the whole plan. And her motive is even more disturbing. She wants fame. Jill wants to become the new Sidney, but without going through the real suffering, so she decides to create her own story. She sets everything up, manipulates events, and even kills people close to her to build the perfect survivor narrative. The craziest part comes after that. She starts hurting herself to make it look like she survived the final attack. And of course, casting Emma Roberts was a smart move, since she had a lighter, more approachable image, which helps completely hide the twist. And it works. Almost nobody suspects her until it's too late. But after doing all that, things don't exactly work out for her.
Clear.
Honeymoon. In VHS, during the segment Second Honeymoon, we follow Sam and Stephanie, newlyweds traveling across the United States and recording everything on camera. The vibe is light, intimate, almost like a vlog. But little by little, strange things start happening. Money disappears from the room, objects move around, and at night someone seems to sneak in while they are asleep. Stephanie reacts like anyone would. She gets scared, questions her husband, and tries to understand what's happening. That automatically places her in the role of possible victim, and the audience buys it easily. But the tension builds until the mysterious figure finally appears for real. The attack happens fast and brutally. Sam doesn't have time to react. And that's when the twist hits. Stephanie doesn't react like someone in danger. She watches. She stays calm. And then comes the reveal. She was involved the entire time. The intruder wasn't some random threat. She was an accomplice. The two were in a relationship and had planned everything together from the start. Everything that seemed like coincidence was actually part of the plan. Even the moments where Stephanie appeared scared were just acting. The segment was directed by Ty West, who chose an extremely minimalist style with no soundtrack and fixed camera shots in several scenes. That makes everything more uncomfortable and helps hide the twist until the final second. Suspicious Doctor. In Predators, we follow several characters on an unknown planet used as a hunting ground by aliens. Everyone there has a dark past. Mercenaries, criminals, trained killers, everyone except Edwin. He presents himself as a doctor, just an ordinary guy who ended up there by mistake. He acts scared, insecure, always stays behind the others. Basically the last person you'd suspect, and it works. While the group tries to survive and understand what's happening, Edwin becomes almost an invisible supporting character. He helps here and there, but never stands out. But as the story progresses, small, strange signs start to appear. Nothing too obvious, but enough to suggest something is off. The twist comes later when he finally reveals who he really is. Edwin isn't an innocent civilian. He's a serial killer. Someone who was already murdering people on Earth and who, on that planet, simply found the perfect place to keep doing it without consequences. The strangest part is that he doesn't even try to hide from it. On the contrary, he accepts the situation with disturbing calm. While everyone else wants to survive, he seems comfortable there, like he's finally in the right environment. And casting Topher Grace was intentional. He had a softer, almost harmless image in Hollywood, which helped fool first-time viewers. If you're enjoying the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a lot. The Husband. In What Lies Beneath, the story follows Claire Spencer, a woman who starts noticing strange things happening inside her own home after her daughter leaves for college. Sounds, doors opening, strange reflections. Everything points to something supernatural, especially when she begins believing the spirit of a young woman is trying to communicate with her. In the middle of all this is her husband, Norman Spencer, a respected professor, calm, and seemingly perfect. He's the kind of character who always gives off security, constantly trying to calm Claire down and explain everything rationally. But as Claire investigates on her own, the story completely changes direction. The supposed haunting isn't random. There's a very specific reason behind it. The young woman appearing to Claire is Madison, a student who had an affair with Norman. And when she threatened to expose everything, he solved the problem in the worst way possible, by killing her and hiding her body in the lake near the house. From that point on, his behavior starts making sense. Throughout the entire movie, Norman manipulates Claire, trying to convince her she's confused or emotionally unstable. He uses her past, a car accident, as an excuse to discredit everything she sees. It's pure psychological control. When Claire finally puts the pieces together, he drops the act completely. His attempt to maintain the perfect image turns into desperation to protect himself. And the final confrontation happens exactly where it all began, in the lake, where his past literally rises back to the surface. Casting Harrison Ford in that role surprised a lot of people because he had always been associated with heroes. Here, he does the exact opposite: deadly cupcake. In Happy Death Day, we follow Tree, a college student who relives the same day over and over after being murdered by someone wearing a baby face mask. The setup is simple. She wakes up, lives the day, dies, and starts over. Over time, Tree begins investigating who the killer might be, analyzing everyone around her. And in the middle of all that, there's Lori, her roommate. Lori is the kind of character who fades into the background. Quiet, polite, almost forgettable. In one of the loops, she even makes Tree a birthday cupcake. And let's be honest, nobody suspects someone who does something like that. But that seemingly sweet detail becomes the key to the twist. After several attempts, Tree believes she solved everything by killing a suspect named John Toombs. But when she finally relaxes and eats Lori's cupcake, she dies again and wakes up at the beginning. That's when it clicks. Lori was never just the forgotten friend. She was behind everything the whole time. The cupcake was poisoned. Her motive? Jealousy. Lori was involved with a professor who was also seeing Tree. And that was enough to turn someone invisible into a calculating killer. This plot twist works so well because the movie literally trains you to suspect everyone, except her, the detective. Hard Eyes revolves around a killer who targets couples on Valentine's Day. The city falls into panic, and Detective Janine Shaw takes the lead in the investigation. She's presented as the experienced, focused cop who genuinely wants to stop the killer before more people are attacked. Alongside her, we follow protagonist Allie and Jay trying to survive as the chaos escalates. Everything makes it seem like the danger is always outside, never inside the investigation itself. But the movie flips everything when it reveals there isn't just one killer. Hard Eyes is actually a group, and at the center of it all is Janine herself. She's not just involved, she's the mastermind behind the murders. Using her position in the police department, she manipulates evidence, redirects suspicion, and keeps everything under control while continuing to kill. And it doesn't stop there. Her husband, David Shaw, who works in police tech, is also part of it. The two share a twisted obsession with couples and turn the murders into a kind of personal ritual. As if that weren't strange enough, a third element enters the picture. Eli, a fan obsessed with the couple. The most interesting part is how the movie plays with audience trust. You spend most of the story believing Janine is the only barrier between the protagonists and the killer, when in reality, she's orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. The new girl. In The Faculty, the story follows a group of students who begin noticing their teachers acting strangely. Little by little, they discover an alien species is taking over people's bodies and turning everyone into a hive mind. Among the group is Mary Beth Hutchinson, the typical new girl who just moved to town. She gets close to the protagonists and quickly earns everyone's trust. And that's crucial because while the group tries to understand and fight the threat, Mary Beth is right there watching every move. One of the most important moments happens when they use a caffeine-based drug to test who's infected, since it affects the aliens. Mary Beth pretends to take the substance to prove she's human. That practically eliminates all suspicion. It's a simple trick, but extremely effective. The twist comes at the end. Just when everything seems resolved, she reveals her true form. Mary Beth isn't a survivor. She's the source of everything, the queen of the species, responsible for the entire infestation, and the most interesting detail is her motivation. She doesn't see herself as the villain. Mary Beth believes she's offering something better, a life without fear, without loneliness, where everyone shares the same consciousness. The traitor. In 2002's Resident Evil, we start with Alice waking up in an isolated mansion with no memory, completely lost and having no idea who she is or what's going on. Soon she finds Spence Parks, who is in the exact same situation, also suffering from memory loss, which immediately creates a connection between them. They seem like natural allies in the middle of all the chaos. When a military team storms the place, we learn that everything is tied to the Hive, an underground laboratory owned by the Umbrella Corporation where an outbreak has turned employees into hostile creatures. Spence stays with the group, mostly keeping to himself. A little sarcastic, but never raises major suspicion. If anything, he gives off that kind of a jerk, but trustworthy enough to survive with vibe. But as the mission goes on and things get more intense, his memory starts coming back, and that's when the twist hits. Spence remembers that he was the one responsible for releasing the T-virus inside the Hive. His plan was to steal the virus and the antidote to sell on the black market. To make sure no one interfered, he caused the entire collapse of the facility, getting hundreds of people killed in the process. The irony is that even after remembering everything, he barely changes. He stays selfish, trying to save himself at any cost. Instead of helping the group, he tries to take the antidote for himself, and his ending is pretty straightforward. He gets attacked by one of the lab's creatures and doesn't make it out. The Sheriff. In Thanksgiving, the town of Plymouth becomes the site of a tragedy after a chaotic Black Friday event. Months later, someone starts hunting down and killing people connected to that incident. That's when John Carver appears, a masked killer inspired by a historical figure from the town itself, which gives everything an ironic and disturbing tone. In the middle of it all, the person who seems to be on the right side is Sheriff Eric Newland, the man in charge of investigating the murders and protecting the survivors. He's calm, experienced, and completely trustworthy. Classic character you never question. But the movie slowly plants doubts until the reveal hits. evidence. The sheriff himself is the killer behind the mask. Eric Newland has been using the John Carver identity to carry out a personal revenge plan. His motivation comes from the death of Amanda, his lover who was pregnant and died during the Black Friday chaos. He blames the people now being hunted, whether for direct involvement or negligence. In his mind, it's justice. What makes it even more disturbing is how he goes about it. He doesn't just kill the victims. He stages a twisted Thanksgiving feast around them, making everything far more grotesque. And the most interesting part is how the film constantly plays with the audience by making the sheriff the authority figure, the person who should solve the problem, when in reality, he is the problem. By the end, his identity is exposed, but his fate is left somewhat open. There's an explosion and everything suggests he died, but the movie leaves just enough doubt in the air. The perfect girlfriend. In Get Out, the story follows Chris, a photographer who goes to meet his girlfriend Rose Armitage's family during a weekend trip. Right from the start, the film makes you trust her. There's a scene with a police officer where Rose defends Chris during an awkward stop, immediately positioning her as someone on his side. That supportive girlfriend, you know? But that trust is exactly the trick. Once they arrive at the house, things get stranger and stranger. The servants act robotic. Rose's parents behave oddly, but she stays by Chris's side, seemingly supporting him and trying to calm everything down. That makes the audience relax. When everything finally blows up, the twist hits. Rose isn't just part of the problem, she's central to it. She actively participates in her family's disturbing scheme involving kidnapping black people for a kind of body-swapping procedure. And her role is the coldest of all: seduce, gain trust, and bring the victims to the house. And that moment with the cop earlier, it wasn't protection at all. It was strategy. She just didn't want Chris's name on record anywhere. No paper trail, no investigation. The most unsettling part is her complete behavioral shift. Once she reveals who she really is, every trace of emotion disappears. All that's left is this eerie, calculated calm. The fake grandparents. In The Visit, the story follows two siblings, Becca and Tyler, who go spend a week with grandparents they've never met. Their mother had a difficult past with her parents and cut contact years ago, so the trip seems like a chance for family reconnection. At first, everything feels a little odd, but still somewhat normal. The grandmother is eccentric, the grandfather is quiet, and there are strange rules like not leaving your room after 9:30 at night. Weird, but manageable. But as the days pass, their behavior gets increasingly bizarre. The grandmother has disturbing nighttime episodes. The grandfather becomes more and more unpredictable, and the atmosphere starts getting deeply uncomfortable. The kids, especially Becca, who's filming everything documentary style, begin realizing this isn't just old people being weird. Something is seriously wrong. The tension builds until they decide to show the footage to their mom during a video call. And then comes the twist. Their mother doesn't recognize those people at all. They are not the real grandparents. The truth is far darker. Those two are escaped psychiatric patients who found the real grandparents, murdered them, and took their place in the house. Everything that seemed merely strange instantly becomes much more horrifying. And the worst part is that the movie had been dropping clues the entire time, but very subtly. This was the film that marked a kind of comeback for M. Night Shyamalan after a heavily criticized period in his career. And he did it by returning to a simpler horror style with found footage camera work and a heavy focus on psychological tension. Can you think of any character you trusted but definitely shouldn't have? If so, drop it in the comments. On screen is a video where we show great horror movies ruined by their endings. Click and watch. See you there.